Hi, I'm John Morrissey. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll repeat, it's great to see 300 plus people at any event in this town, and I've been in an awful lot of events for the last 53 years. About every 10 years we have something that draws the crowd. Sometimes it's a friendly crowd, sometimes it's a mixed crowd, sometimes the crowd's pretty upset. I would say this particular political environment, crowds are pretty upset, and they deserve to be. I'm a local attorney. I'm a Waterloo child, grew up and went to UNI, then the law school in Iowa City. After that, I had the experience of being involved in interning in a couple of legal service offices and working with people over at Davenport. That situation caused me to be partly bilingual. We serviced one of our days each week out of that clinic down at Muscatine with migrant workers. So I know a little bit about immigration, but that's not what I'm talking about today. As far as after that, when I got out of law school, I got drafted, except I'm blind in my right eye, so you can guess I didn't get to go to Vietnam. I did something that was a civilian service alternative and worked 3 years in an Indian legal service program in South Dakota. And that, imagine, that was one of the best experiences of my life, but it was also something that was a precursor of 50 years later. In 1972, my program was federally funded. I wrote the grant each year. In 1972, our then president did something called impounding the funds for the program. And that was Richard Nixon, and he hated legal services. He hated law reform cases. He stated he hated the Indian Civil Rights Act. He hated the things that came out of the Johnson administration and the Kennedy administration. So we were prepared for it, but for me to have a payroll at my office on the reservation, I was blessed to have a banker that lived across the street, or I shouldn't say that, but a banker's son. And I was able to borrow $6,000 and have a payroll while the federal judge, who was the last thing from a raving radical, told Nixon's administration they can't impound that money. Congress enacted that legislation and Congress funded it. Sound familiar? Go forward a year to 1973, we wrote the grant again, and guess what happened again? Impounded again. Nixon was in trouble, but he wasn't in enough trouble yet. And what happened again was the federal judge, several weeks later, enjoined them from that. We did the same arrangement as far as getting payroll borrowed. And at that point, my family and myself decided probably about 3 years is about all we can do out here. We thought it would be safer to go back to Iowa, so accepted a job in Des Moines as a director of the Legal Service Corporation for their appeals division. At that point, guess what happened again? The Iowa Legal Service Corporation was impounded by Nixon. And at that point, the district court out of Des Moines enjoined him a few weeks later, but that didn't do me any good because at that point I had 2 kids. I needed a job. Thank God I had a friend in Fairfield, and I came down here and became your assistant county attorney in 1973, December. After that happened, though, Congress actually, in a bipartisan move, passed something called the 1974 Act Against Impoundment. And that's been the law ever since. And it's still the law. My life in Fairfield has been an enjoyable experience professionally and nice for raising a family. I have one of my sons from Utah is back. I have 60% of the kids and grandkids around here, but he's back from Utah with 2 of the grandkids, and we just got back from Van Buren County in the Dutchman store. So we've all been there too, right? So anyway, for 18 years, I was your prosecuting attorney for the county. 35 years of being your city attorney for City of Fairfield. I also have represented half a dozen other smaller towns, Birmingham for 25 years, Keosauqua for 20, different places that we're all familiar with. And I consider it, the great joy of my life to see grassroots like this and see small town governments really govern themselves. That's what it's supposed to be about. So when you see somebody that thinks he's king and starts telling you that he's above the law and nobody says anything back, that's a pretty good reason to spend your Saturday afternoon with a bunch of people that don't agree. I've been listening to the other speakers, and I identify with various things and various vulnerable citizens in our community. First year I got here, my partner Ed Kelly and I back then, we got involved in a practice with an old man who had been here for 60 years, a guy named Booker Smith. I don't know if any of you remember that name, but Booker and his dad Russell practiced for 110 years here. And they loved the community. They were county attorney, city attorney, that kind of stuff over the years and did their parts. But as far as what we had to start with, and from that time forward, we had some families that had vulnerable members. We did guardianships and conservatorships and things having to do with protective payees and things that the Department of Human Services expected us to make sure they were in order for families that had a disabled child. Sometimes it was an adult dependent, but it was part of what the community, and I say this, it was a bipartisan perspective because the legislature we had in the Des Moines State House at that time was a much kinder legislature. And I believe Congress was much more capable of being bipartisan in the 70s, 80s, and 90s than what we're seeing today. But those folks that needed help back then, they still need help now. And I can speak from personal experience also. I'm a parent of a son who at 6 months of age was stricken with spinal meningitis. He's 47 years old now. He grew up deaf, mute, and mentally challenged. He's a great kid. He's very well balanced, and he's tried hard to have different jobs and so forth. But it's one of those situations where without the help of things like AEA, Department of Education funded, things like SSI, which takes care of a subsidized rent program, which this town has been very good about. We've got all kinds of what I would call subsidized and they're specialized hybrid residential arrangements for needy and vulnerable citizens. You'll have 3 or 4 residents living in a family home with house parents. We also have now some multiplex apartment buildings like Jackson Point that is a subsidized federal 202 and Section 8 rental that has as many as 28 challenged residents at a time. And those folks, it's just one example, but they did have for about 40 years, up to the time of COVID, a place called the Tenco Workshop. Back in 1981, we raised about $50,000-$60,000 to remodel Bill Drake's body shop, which the Tenco Foundation was willing to buy the building for us if we could put together a program center. And when I say that I wanted to talk to you about state and federal working together, programs that were blended and worked well in a bipartisan world for many decades. I'm talking about places like the TENCO workshop. Workshops like that have been in every judicial district in the state, which I know a lot about. But the judicial districts, all during COVID, they had to shut their sheltered workshops. So we lost TENCO here during the COVID, and the way it was funded and the way it was managed, every person from the time they were an adult coming out of high school, or my son coming out of the school for the deaf, they went through something that was an ICP and an IEP. Those are terms that AEA and caseworkers in Des Moines at Human Services and at Voc Rehab and the Department of Labor and so forth, they know what those mean, but they worked well year after year after year from the time we set up the TENCO workshop in 1981 until COVID. That's 4 decades of good work for adult dependents. In this community, that meant 4 or 5 dozen different dependent adults, and then there were other folks from the surrounding areas that participated. We had wonderful employers centers in this town, factories. I'll throw a few names out: Dexter, Agra, Traffics. It used to be Harper. They all had some jobs that could be contracted to the sheltered workshop. When they did that stuff, the sheltered workshop gave people the dignity of working. They weren't earning full wages or things like that, but it was still great to get a paycheck. I know my kid was, really enthralled with the idea that he was working a real job 4 days a week. Now, after the COVID experience, the Voc Rehab Department, what should have happened, and I'm kind of addressing this in the sense of we're still out here looking at people in our community that haven't fully recovered from COVID, even though there was 4 years of the Recovery Act monies, even though there was another group of monies that came to Iowa called the infrastructure money. These are billions of dollars. There's still a couple $1 billion just sitting up in Des Moines that, quote, from the eyes of the majority party, there's too many strings attached to. That's outrageous. I think our congressman should really be ashamed of the fact that it's just being something to sit on. All right. I could talk to you for about 2 hours about this with a special burn. But the idea to convey to Congressman Miller Meeks is she's taken an oath to do a lot of things. In some ways, she's a very nice person and a very special person. She's an ophthalmologist that has a good reputation, but as a doctor, she took an oath, do no harm. She's also a retired military officer, and she took an oath to preserve and protect. She needs to do that. Yes. As a congressman, she's supposed to uphold and defend our Constitution and our federal laws. So what she could do is tell Des Moines, instead of firing 39 Voc Rehab workers and preventing the refunding of workshops around the state, break that money loose. Tell the legislature and Governor Reynolds that could still put a lot of people back into positions before COVID. Instead of, what's going to happen if Elon and the little boys show up? It's going back in the sack and going back out to D.C. So that's not fair to the people here that it was meant for. Yes. All right, I am going to sit down, but you know my sentiments, and I'm so glad you all came out.